All right, welcome back to our author interviews from the semi-sages of the pages. So this is for Queens in Wonderland, and my name's Teresa, and I'm here with Minerva and also L.S. Reinholt. Minerva's story is good-natured anxiety for the queer creature, and L.S.'s story is Oosh in 1D land. And these stories are so fascinating. They're both whimsical, but in many ways they couldn't be more different from each other. Minerva's story, and I told her this ahead of time. When I read Minerva's story, I actually had COVID and I had a very high fever. And my notes that I wrote down was, this is either sheer genius or sheer nonsense. I can't tell. And that's so perfect for the Wonderland universe. LS's story, though, this one's a little bit more corporate and it's about creating dreamscapes, but there's definitely a lot more of a whimsical, dreamlike atmosphere to it. So, Minerva, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your story?
Yes. Story is good-natured anxiety for the queer creature, and that's actually also a quote in itself from Through the Looking Glass. It's about the Red Queen and the White Queen. They are chasing the same moth, but for very different reasons. One of them wants to stop it from eating her clothes, and the other one wants to protect it. So there's like a friend of mine named it a certain Wonderland environmentalism in, in the story. And I was really proud that it was labeled that way.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. There is an environmental aspect to it of, do we save things that are kind of annoying us, or do we destroy them?
Yeah.
And your story is very dense. I really recommend when you pick up your copy of this book that read this story several times. It has so many different layers to it. And there is definitely an identity aspect to it. There's a lot of searching through Wonderland through it, and has a really fascinating vibe to where, like, there's an invisible horse in it, um, which I really just can't describe all the different layers to it. But LS, your story is a little bit more corporate. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
It's about a character named Oosh, uh, who is looking into going back into the job market after 3 years of being a stay-at-home parent. And she or they decide to apply for a job as a creative monitor, not really knowing what the job is about. And it turns out that she needs to experience custom-made dreams that people have ordered with specific details, and then she has to go in and like quality check them. And these dreams are made by, well, AIs, and they don't really know how to create a dream. So that's basically it. And of course, the dream she enters is very Wonderland inspired.
Yeah. And you're right. There's a social commentary there, especially as we continue to use AI more and more, about how can AI relay the human condition and the human emotions. And the answer is not very well. And hopefully it never really figures that out. It'll take over. Um, but for both of you, what drew you to wanting to write in the Wonderland universe?
The Wonderland universe has always spoken to me. I remember as a kid that I watched the old Disney movie, and I spent forever every time I had some food that I could break into two pieces, that I would eat them like two mushrooms that would make me smaller and bigger. And so it's something that's been on my mind for about as long as I can remember. So to play in that universe is a lot of fun. And then, yeah, of course, it was the Queens in Wonderland call. So it was really cool to see the initial queerness that might have been in the original story, and see how to make a new version of that. And like you said, it's a whole journey in my story, and I think that reflects well on how finding out your own identity isn't a straight line. Of course, it isn't. Uh, and I think that, yeah, I think that was really fun to insert that into a story and have all this magic and wonder
Yeah, and you do a brilliant
accompany
job with
that.
it too.
Thank you.
LS?
Yeah, I have the same with the Disney movie and reading the books at a fairly young age. But I think what really got me hooked on Wonderland was when I was doing my thesis and I was writing about the Matrix. And I realized while working with it that whenever they reference Alice in Wonderland or The Wizard of Oz, they flip the references upside down. So the computer created world of the Matrix is the real world in Alice. And when Neo exits it, he goes down the rabbit hole. And that just really, really fascinated me. And I got an annotated version of the book and like went really deep into it. And I love science fiction. So yeah, that connection just made it really special to me.
Oh, that's so cool. I didn't even think about that, but wow. I haven't watched The Matrix in years, but you're right, there is an Alice in Wonderland element to it. That's so cool. What drew you both to being a part of this anthology? And we'll go ahead and start with Minerva for this one.
Yeah, as I said, it's I saw the call and I was like, I want to do something in that on that playground of Wonderland and see where it will go. And for a very long time, I didn't really have like a workable idea. I knew I'd have to reread it because it had been a very long time since I read the Wonderland stories, and I think I had only read them in Dutch so far because I have a too pretty hardcover that was too tempting to not to not
Oh,
read as such. So I think it was the first time that I actually read it in English, which is a lot better because there's so much wordplay and you can't translate all of that properly, even if a very good job was done. But you'll never get everything across that's in there. So that was an interesting start getting into it. And then what really sparked the story was that I rediscovered the White Queen whose memory is going backwards. And I've been playing with the theme of memory in my stories and fairy tales for a very long time. And that was a very interesting concept that I really wanted to use. And from there, the rest slowly flowed
yeah.
out.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to think on that one, but yeah, definitely. And you did a really good job when you basically had two characters running opposite in linearness.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
they're actually in the original Through the Looking Glass, I think. So, but yeah, I it was interesting to do more with them and to bring them into the spotlight, I thought.
yeah, yeah. LS?
Well, it was actually Minerva who called my attention to this book. So that was very, very appreciated. And as I said, I like the Wonderland story and I like science fiction. So my original plan was to have a pilot and a spaceship go through a black hole
Oh,
as a rabbit hole into this world, and then after many adventures discover that it was an artificial dream. But I ended up spending much too big a portion of the story getting the pilot through the black hole. So I'm a teacher, and there's a lot of talk at my work about AIs because, of course, students are looking for
hmm.
shortcuts to doing papers, and that was very big at the time for me. So they kind of got together, and I just ended up with this idea of a person being in a dream. They know it's artificial, but it's about the quality of the dream.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. I liked that. Was there anything that was difficult about writing these stories? And we'll go to LS for this one.
Keeping it short. I could have written
Yes.
a novel.
Yeah, actually, the story that I wrote too, I actually could very easily expand it into a novel, very, very easily. And my brain keeps on kind of like trying to, and I'm like, nope, nope, we have other projects first.
I had portions like Oosh diving into a lake and meeting mer people, and a whole adventure going on down there, and the court scene in Alice in Wonderland. I wanted to include that, and by the end of it, I just had to like look at what is necessary to tell the story and cut everything else out.
Yes. Yeah, and that's always sometimes the hard part of writing, especially short fiction. I always end up cutting a fair amount too. Minerva, what about you?
For me, the difficult part, as usual, was actually getting a plot to properly go from A to B and not somewhere over there. um, yeah, as I said, I started with rereading the book, and I made notes for elements that I could include or elements that already like sort of refer to queerness. Um, and then I was like, okay, I have these two queens, and I want them to have an adventure together. But what are they doing? And at that moment, a friend of mine told me that one of her two cats was chasing a moth. And I was like, a moth? That is so Wonderland. and and yeah, they started chasing a moth, and I was like, okay, I can work with this. And the rest happened. So thanks to the cats of my friends, this is a story. And that's also so fitting because the two cats, like Kitty and Snowdrop, from the Alice stories, well, my two characters were already named Kitty and Snowdrop because the queens were based on Alice's cats. It turns out at the end. So yeah, it was a circle that just sort of happened by coincidence.
Isn't that fascinating how it feels sometimes like the universe just kind of helps guide your stories? It's the links sometimes are so absolutely incredible. So, all right, before we get to the readings, where can our viewers find out more information about you? And we'll go to LS for this.
Oh, I don't have much of an online presence. I do have a Facebook where I mainly just list the titles of what I have written so far.
And Minerva?
I do have a website, so it's minervacerridwen.wordpress.com. And that also has links to all the social media because I'm pretty much everywhere. I also have an Instagram where I post my more visual art. Yeah. And I also often post about the stories that LS and I write together on my blog, on my website. So if you want to follow LS's work, that's usually also like somewhere mentioned on my blog. So
Awesome.
because we write a lot together as well. We're almost ready to start pitching a novel that we've been working on for a long time. So if anyone wants
Yay!
a science fiction novel, hit us up.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, ready to go to the readings?
I think so. Good-natured anxiety for the queer creature. Kitty the Red, mage of her tower and queen of the realm of gambits, was running around a meadow and wildly swinging a butterfly net. The net in question had been misnamed, as the insect she intended to catch had feathery, unclapped antennae. The creature was also very fast, and Kitty's eyes had barely managed to focus on its fluttering wings when a light pink and blue shawl slapped right into her face. She could only withhold herself from cursing up a storm because that would be bound to send more objects flying at inopportune times. Her actions with the misnamed net had been preceded by a very long journey. She had left her own kingdom and traveled all the way across another before finally finding herself hot on the moth's trail. And now this. Now this. She dropped the net and flung the shawl towards the ground as well, but there was no satisfying smack. The satin hitched the ride on another breeze and daintily drifted away. The moth, of course, had disappeared without a trace. Oh, a voice skidded along the path on a pair of large white boots. Or rather, they must have been white once. Now the boots were smeared with mud, as well as several of the more terrible thixotropic fluids one might pick up during a long walk on questionable roads. The person who had brought along both the voice and the boots didn't so much wear clothes, as that she appeared to have whirled through a wardrobe filled with plain pieces of bleached linen and simply carried whatever stuck, in whatever place had decided to stick. Oh dear, that was my shawl. I'm sorry, Kitty said. If I'd known it belonged to someone, I'd have held on to it. Do you often come across shawls that don't belong to anyone? The person in white asked, looking intrigued. It's more that I don't often come across people, Kitty replied. Oh. Wyatt held out a grubby hand for Kitty to shake. I am... She hesitated. Snowdrop the White, but don't be mistaken, she added hastily. That may sound like a mage's name or even a queen's, but I am a knight. I see. But then you are a knight without a horse, aren't you? Kitty remarked. Snowdrop hesitated again. I do have a horse at home. It might have been a good idea to bring it, just to, carry all this. She gestured at all the bags of various sizes that were tied to the random pieces of linen on her body. Right. Kitty decided it wasn't so difficult to believe. Even bards and pranksters were knighted these days. In general, knights were considered good traveling companions, eager to protect whomever joined their quest. Perhaps it wouldn't be unwise to present herself as one, too. Mages like her had a reputation for being spiritless and stiff. Adding to that her royal blood, well, admitting the truth about her identity was seldom a good idea upon a first meeting. Kitty the Red. She gestured at her pristine red dress as if she were merely adding the color to her name in jest. I am a knight too, with a horse, but it's a little useless. Pieces go missing all the time. Right on cue, the grinning head of a large stallion popped into existence behind her. When it wasn't being stubborn or making a point of being mostly invisible, it was actually an extremely useful horse. The only explanation for the high speed with which she had traveled was that she had been floating on its back. Never mind that a lot of the time, that back didn't seem to be attached to anything. Even so, they had never moved fast enough for the landscape around her to properly change. It was all meadows, forests, meadows again. She was terribly bored, and that was what made her suggest, Snowdrop the White, would you care to join me? I would feel safer in the company of another knight, and we might have more luck finding your shawl together. Oh, yes, we will have had so much fun, Snowdrop replied. Kitty thought that was an odd turn of phrase, but felt pleased about the outcome all the same.
Good, perfect. Oh, I love it so much. All right, Ellis, you ready?
Yeah, it is going to be a bit shorter. And I've decided to jump a bit into the story.
Perfect.
So this is when Oosh is entering the dream. Oosh was falling slowly down what seemed to be an endless hole. She screamed, "Would you cut that out?" The voice sounded very close to her ear, causing the scream to rise in pitch as Oosh twisted around in the air to see who had spoken. "I'm serious," the voice said. "Shut up, or I'm having you evicted." The absurdity of the statement startled Oosh, and she gasped. Who are you?" "I am the main CP in charge of Project 154712, the voice answered. "I'm very good at what I do, and I will not have you messing it up for me." There was a slight pause in which Oosh felt a very unsettling urge to roll her eyes. "Why do they always saddle me with the rookies?" the voice continued. "Excuse me." Oosh had managed to get her body in a somewhat upright position and felt a little bit more in control of the situation, though she was undeniably still falling. This is your first assignment, isn't it? Oosh nodded. Did they even tell you what you're supposed to be doing? Oosh shook her head. Then for some reason she sighed. You're here to experience the product, making notes of any mistakes or imperfections along the way. Not that there ever are any. I am very good at what I do. Oh. While Oosh considered this, she tried waving her hand a bit and found that it spun her slowly around. I'm just here to dream? That is such a crass way of putting it, but I suppose it will have to do. If it gets the point across. Yes, you're experiencing the dream, while I and my team created it, and afterwards you're going to compare it to the client's specifications before declaring it fit for consumption. Or give us notes on what to change. I see. Oosh didn't really, but found it better to play along. And you're a CP? Yes. What is that? A cognizant program. What? Like an AI? The voice did not speak to her again for the rest of the long, slow descent. The landing could be a bit softer, Oosh complained as she rubbed her bottom. Or was that for my benefit? Would you be quiet, please? The voice sounded next to her. We're going to have to remove all this dialogue in post-production, and it's such tedious work. Sorry. Oosh felt her pout morph into a smirk and stamped her foot. Would you stop emoting for me? Can't be helped, the CP answered. At this stage of production, I am still partially connected to the avatar that will become the client once the DI is released. So will they be doing all your frowns and eye rolls too? Oosh huffed. Of course not. That will be filtered out in post-production. But I have to suffer through it. However, her mood changed drastically as she looked around the garden in which she had landed. Oh wow, this is beautiful. Did you make this? Just the framework. The voice sounded a tad friendlier. My subordinates take care of the details. Oosh nodded as she began walking towards a particularly beautiful patch of roses. Is it okay if I check this out? I mean, we wouldn't want any of your subs to have messed up your beautiful product, would we? So, subordinates, the voice called out, but it was growing more faint as she moved away from the starting point. Oosh did not mind that one bit.
Good. Oh my gosh, these are so awesome stories. So thank you both so very much. If you are watching this, that means that Queens in Wonderland is either up for pre-order or is available in all the places. So please make sure you pick up your copy, check out Minerva's story, Good-Natured Anxiety for the Queer Creature, and LS's Oosh Lee in 1D Land. Do you have anything else to add? Happy unbirthday. Yes, yes. Well, thank you both very much for coming on, and make sure you pick up your copy. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Take care.